Hello guys. Today I thought I'd make a video on the World Economic Forum on how essentially these people, what they're doing is they're bringing out an entirely new reality, an entirely new system for our world, one that is not only technological, but it's also altering the biological aspects of humanity while also merging us with the fallen angels. And what they're ultimately going to do is bring about the spiritual aspect of reality and try to merge it with the physical. And yeah, so I want to make this video to expose World Economic Forum. I obviously have made videos about United Nations. Lots of my videos expose them, but today we're going to focus on World Economic Forum because, they essentially want to have an entirely new world economic system that they can use to manipulate humanity.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis denounced the upcoming World Economic Forum being held in Davos next week, taking the opportunity to note that Florida is not open to embracing any policy ideas that might come from the meeting. Let's watch.
They do this thing in Davos. They're doing it next week. All these elites come in, the World Economic Forum, and basically, their vision is they run everything and everybody else is just like a serf, like a peasant. They say they're going after energy, ESG, all these other things. And you see the Biden administration wants to nix gas stoves. Are you kidding me? I want gas stoves. I mean, imagine how many people had the hurricane come through, didn't have power right away, but were able to turn on some. So you cannot go down this road, but that's exactly what they want to do. And it's really weakening Western society, Western values, but underlying a lot of that is the CCP.
He was referring to the Chinese Communist Party there. He also made it clear in the press conference that he will seek to curb China's influence in the Sunshine State.
The 53rd annual meeting will take place in Davos, Switzerland, and is set to see record turnout, featuring 52 heads of state and about 600 CEOs. Climate envoy John Kerry will represent the United States. Look, I gotta say, all those heads of states and hundreds of CEOs does not sound like a especially good time from my perspective. I think that this is probably a wise political move. It's always healthy to make an attack against elites, and certainly this is the most elite of elite bunches gathering here at Davos. Of course, there is always this kind of what seems, from my perspective, to be a little bit of not quite related culture war-ish jab mixed in there with the gas stoves. Look, I love a gas stove as much as anybody. It takes my electric stove forever to heat up, and my omelets haven't been the same since I moved into my new apartment.
Oh, you went from gas to electric?
I went from gas to electric.
Oof, that's devastating.
But it's also true that 12.7% of all childhood asthma cases are caused by gas stoves, and people should be informed about the health risks. Yeah, the health consequences of gas stoves are only just now being understood and reported on. So it's a serious issue. Maybe you don't care, maybe your kids are grown, but other people care. I'm not saying there should necessarily be a ban, but pretending like there's not downsides to this or that it's just a random draconian edict coming down from on high is also a little absurd. So what do you make of this kind of political move from DeSantis to say, hey, I'm anti-Davos?
I think it's a sign of the ascendancy of a kind of right and left populism, the fusion of that, which is very anti-Davos mindset. The World Economic Forum brings together all these heads of state, former heads of state, current heads of state, and corporate partners, powerful elites, who all have a lot of similar ideas and similar goals on economics, on a lot of climate stuff. Since COVID, there's been a lot of how can we use the COVID emergency to the Great Reset is what it's called. How can society be better planned from here on out. And unlike Ron DeSantis, I don't think every idea that would come out of this meeting would necessarily be bad, but I think the concerns are well-founded, which is that it's a little bit of the technocratic elite has a lot of blind spots, is not very down with democratic decision making, and also not very down necessarily with civil liberties, because those can get in the way. I think they saw that with COVID, that people don't want to be required necessarily to take vaccines and other things, don't want to be required to wear masks forever. It might have contrasting views that is frustrating to the elites and confounds their ability to kind of like plan and organize society in the fashion that they want. And that's also part of the China aspect of this, which is, the whole kind of global, and I think trade is good, but one of the issues with, trading with China and being more open with China is we've kind of inadvertently brought in some of the Chinese government's closed-mindedness toward criticism and free speech is actually being imported into not exactly Western culture, but Western decision-making with our governments and our businesses. People self-censor, institutions self-censoring in order to not get priced out of the Chinese market, that I think is very bad.
This is what the point that Batya sometimes makes about Elon Musk in China and failure to critique because of his factories. And
or the NBA, or Activision Blizzard, or any number of U.S. celebrities or political figures or institutions, private, which it's a weird situation because they have the right to they have the free speech right to, not want any criticism of China, but they're doing it because an authoritarian government that we have no control over wants that.
Yeah, and money talks. LeBron James gets a talking to from the NBA when he makes some anti-China comments, and people care about their contracts and how much they're able to earn. And that's, I think, precisely why this particular aggregation of human beings at Davos is concerning, because when you look at what aligns them, what interests they all share, it's very elite financial interest, and it's not the interest of the overwhelming majority of people who live on this planet.
And it speaks to a concern that I think a lot of our viewers have, a lot of independent-minded people, right and left, which is that actually the elites have so much in common. They say they're Republican, they say they're Democrat, but there's so much agreement, there's so much social cooperation, there's so enjoyment of each other's company.
Precisely.
You're not in that meeting. You're not, in those smoke-filled, although they're not smoke-filled, I don't think. At Davos, they're definitely not smoke-filled.
Allow proper ovens, Bobby.
Unfortunately, there's no smoking in those rooms. So it's shielded from view. And I think it presents certain concerns. Obviously, you can go too far and be a little conspiratorial about how bad it is or something. I think some of their economic ideas are probably good, but should be embraced or allowed or be voted on. And it's still up to individual countries. Like the U.S., we're our own country. We have a respect for civil liberties, not just respect, but legally required under our Constitution. So you can't just say, we all went off to Davos and decided this is a good policy. Now it's going to be imposed on the people of the U.S. or of Canada or of Mexico or of any country. No, we get to decide.
Right, but I think the concern people have is that this stuff gets snuck in through the back door. I mean, we just had this 4,000 pages of legislation that was rushed through right before Christmas.
No one read it.
But nobody read. And this was one of the asks from the 20 Freedom Caucus people who were just holding up the speakership vote last week. And one of the asks that they secured, which is that they have to have single issue bills, or at least there has to be a single issue title on the bill. There's a little bit of warbliness about what they were actually given.
Imagine if it was debated, actual provision, instead of at the last minute snuck into a document that is far too long for anyone to read it, and then you have to vote on it immediately, and you have to vote yes because the whole country's economy will collapse if we just all of a sudden didn't have a budget. So nobody can vote against it. I mean, still they do. If it was going to actually, if the vote against it was actually going to succeed, no one could vote for it.
Exactly.
But it's so unserious.
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff in that bill should not be voted for, should be rejected. Tons of it should be rejected, but you don't get to do that because they cram it all in, they put it up there at once. It's so bad.
And they don't give you time to read it. So another thing, one of the asks that they secured was, I think, a 72-hour period before a bill was passed where people have an opportunity. I mean, it's still a very short time to read all of those pages with any kind of precision or depth, but I think they're moving in the right direction, and there's some important populist asks that came through that are getting really underanalyzed and underappreciated by the liberal media.
Well, and previously, the vast majority of congressional representatives in both parties had no say or input in what was going into that package. It's the speaker and a handful of other powerful people in both parties get together and decide, and then you have to vote for it.
Yeah, that 4,000-page document we're talking about was a Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi special. That is a bipartisan, secretive, non-transparent special. So it's interesting that there are these parallels between the problem with Congress and the problem with Davos being the lack of transparency and democracy.
Yeah, this is why we always have to hold the elite's feet to the fire. Yeah. More Rising right after this. Stay with us.